What do you have to lose right now? I just think people are scared to fail.
Being able to understand what it means to have to wait, to be patient.
You're listening to the Yash and Company Podcast.
Hey everyone, this is Yashanka Chalasani, otherwise known as Yash, and yes, you are listening to another episode of the Yash and Company Podcast. This is a show where we learn from the world's best 20 and 30-year-olds. These people have transcended all sorts of different sectors on recordings to date, whether it's professional athletes, people on the Forbes 30 under 30 list, nonprofit founders, writers. We explore and tap into different people with all sorts of different backgrounds. But on this episode, I thought that we could mix things up just a little bit. So on this episode, I'm actually joined by two of my closest friends, Kobby Wiafe and Grant Linnell. So I've actually known these guys since freshman year of college, and we have shared a ton of different experiences together. Most notably, though, are a few trips abroad, one of which was actually an entire semester abroad in the Netherlands that we did on a study abroad. And that was an incredible experience, and we decided to actually commemorate that per se by going on a senior spring break trip together again to Europe. And so we've just shared so much, and it's been really incredible to see these guys actually grow over the past few years. Grant actually recently got engaged. He's actually about to start medical school at the University of Washington. Kobby is about to start medical school with me at Baylor College of Medicine. And so it's been really cool to do life with these guys. But the inspiration for this episode actually came from that senior spring break trip that we did. So when I told people that we were spending probably less than $30 a day traveling internationally, people were just so shocked because they would travel domestically and it would cost them a lot more than what we did internationally. So I thought that we could put a conversation together about some of the things that we've learned along the way. On this episode, we really dive into kind of why we travel internationally, how we plan out our trips, what a typical day looks like, and some of the tips and tricks that we've learned about how to get Airbnbs for really cheap. So on this episode, I hope that you get inspired to travel yourself. It's something that I always recommend to people, but hope you learn a thing or two from our experiences. So without further ado, here is a fun conversation with some of my closest friends, Grant Linnell and Kobby Wiafe. This is Yash. I am in Waco, Texas, recording this episode with two of my really good friends, Kobby Wiafe and Grant Linnell. It's currently finals week, so we decided to use our time doing more important things than studying for our finals, like doing this episode. So Grant, Kobby, thanks for being on the show, guys.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us. It's an honor.
So these guys have actually seen me start talking about the podcast and we're actually on the show. So it's fun for me as a host to have two of my really good friends on here. So guys, it's gonna be fun. So the reason I want to do this episode is because every time we travel, when we come back, I always tell people about our travel experiences. So just to give some context, Grant, Kobby, and I studied abroad together. It was a pre-med study abroad trip during our sophomore year of college. And I have probably spent, I think at the end of that trip, we spent $2,000 each. And whenever I tell people that that's how much the entire 3-month trip costs, they're just kind of taken away by that. And then even as seniors in college, we decided to go on a spring break trip to Europe and go back to Maastricht, but also go to Spain, which is a country that we didn't get to see the first time we were there. And that entire trip in and of itself cost less than $1,000. And so whenever I tell my friends about that, they are just so taken away that it costs so little and we were there for so long and had such a good time. And I think it's probably because there's some misconceptions about what travel really is. And so I'm hoping to answer some of those things on this episode. So guys, maybe a good place for us to start is probably why we travel in the first place, right? So Kobby, Grant, why do you guys travel?
Yeah, so I think that there's a lot of reasons to travel. I think that one, and the main one, is that it's fun. It's fun to do. It's fun to experience new cultures, eat new foods, kind of get out of your comfort zone and experience new things. I think that's kind of one of the main reasons that I like doing it and I enjoy doing it. It's also fun to do when you're doing it with two of your really good friends and be able to bond in that way. I think that it's different when you're abroad, when you're out experiencing new things in a totally new place, when you're around people. I think that, that's different than, say, just being on campus, kind of doing the same things with it. I think that that's a whole new experience and something that I've really enjoyed being able to do. So those are some of the reasons that I enjoy traveling. I think that, as I've started to travel, I realized I want to travel more. I've created kind of a bucket list of things I want to do. A lot of places I still haven't seen that I want to see. I haven't been able to go to Asia. I want to be able to go to Southeast Asia, and there's a lot of places I want to go. Still in Eastern Europe, like Croatia and Greece. And so those are a lot of places that I still want to go to. And experiencing those kind of things in person is, it's different than being able to watch videos on it or see it in pictures. I think that experiencing things in person is a whole different thing, and something that, is a once in a lifetime experience. So those are some of the reasons I've traveled, and I've blessed to be able to do it so far in my life. And I'm excited to continue doing it. What about you, Kobby?
For sure. To hark back on one of the things you said earlier, going out of your comfort zone, I think that's one of the most fun things about traveling, especially for the three of us, because I feel like whenever we travel, we don't necessarily go to what people might think of as tourist destinations. We kind of go to like the middle of a country or to places people don't really think about. And so because of that, it's kind of a challenge in and of itself, just navigating the city, figure out what the heck we're putting in our bodies as we're eating, like where do we go? So just trying to navigate through the difficulties and the hoops of traveling in a foreign country with two of your best friends, that's like really fun. And I think that's one of the main reasons I like traveling so much, is just figuring out how we're going to get to where we want to go and how we're going to go about seeing what we want to see. So I think that's really cool.
Yeah, I think some of the best things about our travel is that it's really not that planned. And so when we go somewhere, it's literally an adventure, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, so let's talk about, when we pick a place to travel, like let's talk about that process and what that looks like, right? So Grant, you're kind of the planner of the whole group. So when you pick a place, how does that start for you?
Yeah, so when I traveled, when we went to Maastricht, it was kind of all set out for us. And
let's give some context about Maastricht real quick. So Maastricht is a small city at the bottom tip of the Netherlands. Yeah. And it's a beautiful city. And one of the reasons it's so neat is because it's not too big, but it's also not too small. So it has its own culture. And it was actually one of the cities that was not allowed to be bombed during the World Wars. And so it feels like you're in the early 1900s, late 1800s. And so that's why it's such a special place in our hearts. But I just want to give a little context about Maastricht. But go ahead.
Yeah. So when we were in Maastricht, we had the chance to have a train pass. So we were really able to kind of design our own schedule because we had a train pass that it was totally paid for, and we could pretty much go anywhere in Western Europe that was within travel distance by train. So that was really fun, and something that was one of my favorite things to be able to do while in Maastricht is to kind of sit down every week and say, hey, where do we want to go this week? Because we have so many options. So, our first week we decided to go out to Copenhagen in Sweden for 4 days, which was a ton of fun and something that was totally spontaneous, which you were able to do because you had a train pass. So that was really cool. And then, taking it back to this year for spring break is a little different, not having the train pass. It had to be a lot more coordinated, and you had to kind of pick out where how you were going to get from one place to another. So kind of when we were planning our trip, we said, we want to travel somewhere. We want to go out of the country. Europe would be really fun to go back to, but you think flights to Europe are at least $700, $800 to get over there. It's kind of the thought we had in our heads. But we started looking, and you use Google Flights, and you can really look at the map of the whole continent. And you can say, I'm leaving from Dallas and I want to go to Europe. And you can look at the whole continent at one time, and you can see all of the different flight prices for the entire continent. And we found that even though the flight to London might have been $700-800 round trip, we found that a flight to Luxembourg City, which kind of random, not many people travel to Luxembourg City, so it makes sense that it might be cheaper than others, was only about $370 round trip.
$374.75.
That's right. Pretty cheap.
And it's crazy because we actually had to go through London to get there.
Right. So yeah, you could have gotten off the flight at London and you would have saved money. You would have come out ahead than booking one directly to London, which is pretty crazy how that works. But anyway, it was at $374. It was less than me flying home for a week. So, it's kind of like at that point is why not fly out there, because you're saving money going there than rather than going to a different destination that might cost more. Yeah. And then once you got there, then you can book different buses, trains, and it's pretty easy. There's different apps that you can use to be able to find the cheapest ways to get from one place to another. And it really is pretty cheap once you're there to be able to travel around, whether through flight, train, or bus. Yeah.
See, I think one of the things that you mentioned there that I kind of wanted to stress a little bit was this idea of going to the continent. Because once you get to the continent, traveling within the continent becomes really easy. It's not like America where a flight from, Dallas to New York is $150. In some of these, in Europe, it's only like 40, 50, 30, sometimes even like $20, right? We've flew on some of those airplanes with that cheap.
Yeah, you have to realize that pretty much the entire area of Western Europe is about as big as the state of Texas. So it's pretty easy to travel just because it's not that big. So.
Yeah. And one of the places we were thinking about going, one of the continents we were thinking about going before we thought about Europe was actually South America, right? And Kobby, you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so we wanted to go to Colombia. I was totally down. Grant was totally down. Shonka was totally down. Talked to my parents about it, and they were a little sketched out, so I did not end up going to Colombia, but I'm sure the three of us will pull up there eventually.
I think they watched Narcos recently. So
they're probably a little too much. They're a little nervous for the boy. I don't blame them. But yeah, that would have been really cool. We're also thinking about going to Iceland. But then there was a random day here in Waco when it was super cold, super windy. I ran into Grant on campus. I'm like, dude, jokingly, I was like, dude, if this is what Iceland is like, dude, I don't even want to go. And literally later that night, Grant texted our group text like, hey guys, let's try to figure out if we want to go to another place because I'm not really feeling this weather. So kind of hopped around. We thought we were going to go to Colombia. That didn't work out. Thought we were going to go to Iceland. That didn't work out. But finally we just settled on, let's go back to Maastricht, hang out for a few days, and then go see Spain. So that's kind of what we decided to do.
Yeah. So we had literally two different continents that we could have chose, right? I always like looking back at that experience because, once we decided that we're going to fly to Luxembourg, we weren't going to Luxembourg. We were just trying to find a landing spot in Europe. And then from that spot, we could have picked any place in the entire continent to go. And we had a plethora of options. It just so happened that we wanted to go back to Maastricht, obviously, because that's a special place for us, and then go back to Spain because we never ended up traveling there. We talked a little bit about finding a place. So now we get there, right? And most people think that, oh my gosh, like if I'm in a country where they're speaking a different language, or I've never tried their foods, things could just get really rough really quick. But for us, we land, and that's when the party starts, right? So when someone comes to you and says that they have some of these hesitations because the culture and just traveling just seems like it's so hard once you get there, what do you say?
I think it's important to realize that that's some people's reality, like every day of their life, and so we shouldn't turn ourselves off to like how they live just because we don't really experience that. For example, when we first got to Luxembourg, we wanted sushi. So I
don't think we wanted sushi. We just wanted food.
Okay, fair enough. Well, I kind of wanted sushi.
Yeah, unlimited food.
So we were on the bus. We drove past this sushi buffet. I was like, hey, let's go in there. And we quickly realized that basically no one in there spoke English. And the entire menu was in like Chinese. So it was very difficult to figure out what we were ordering. But we just started pointing and we had a good time. We had a lot of good food. And we didn't really need any explanation just because like I think we're all open to just like experiencing something we had never experienced before, and just being open to not closing ourselves off to what those different experiences could offer.
Yeah. So nonverbal communication gets you a lot further than you would think. Like you can just point at things or use different hand signals and you get pretty much your point across.
Yeah.
I mean, in Spain, we knew some broken Spanish. We were able to get by. Also, in Europe, most people know some English. Most people speak 3 or 4 languages, and a lot of them do speak English as a language. But if they don't speak English, they know at least some. And if it's totally, in France, sometimes there's people that speak just French, and you might just speak just English. But you can get by. You can get by pointing making hand gestures,
acting if you need to.
You'll be fine.
I think that's one of my favorite parts, right? It's because we just look at each other, we start laughing when someone's trying to communicate with someone else and they don't speak English. And so I'm with you guys that that's probably one of the best parts about traveling is, just experiencing the culture. And, it is a challenge at first, but it's also really fun. Grant, can you talk to a little bit about, so when we travel, and there's so many different places that we could go, right? Once we land in a certain destination, how do you pick the places that we end up going? Now, I know you have a brother that's been there, and so he's been able to pick out a lot of things for us. But beyond that, you've gotten really good at just finding some of these low key spots that are not too touristy, but also that are just hidden gems within each city. So how do you find it?
Yeah, I think that there's probably 3 ways that are the best ways to be able to find where you want to go and the best places to hit. I think that one way is asking people that have been there. I think that's always a good way to go because they probably have similar interests to you, and they know what you're looking for. So that's the easiest way to do that if you've had any other friends that have been studying abroad or traveling abroad. I think that also, just using the internet, Google reviews, TripAdvisor, different things like that, those all are really helpful. And they give you a broad spectrum of things. You can also use Google Maps to be able to pick out what you want to go to. You can star those things, save them, download them offline, and be able to find where you want to be at a certain time. And you can kind of plot out your night that way by starring different locations. And then I think the third way, which we've had the chance to be able to do a few times, is to ask the local people what they recommend. And I think that's really a fun, adventurous thing to be able to do. We've been able to do that with a few of the Airbnbs that we've stayed in. Most people that are Airbnb hosts are looking for kind of traveling people, people to kind of connect with from different areas. So they enjoy giving recommendations. They enjoy talking to you because, they enjoy the same thing that you do, being able to talk to someone from a different culture who has a totally different background and things like that. So I'd say those are the 3 main ways to kind of pick out what you want to do once you're there, but also kind of leaving it open. And, there might be a place that you go to one night, and you enjoy it a lot more than you do. More than you thought you would, and kind of leaving your schedule open to be able to go back to it the next night. I think that is always a good thing, to kind of give yourself flexibility, be able to pick and choose where you want to go.
Yeah, one of the things you mentioned there was about using Google Maps offline. And basically what you were talking about was because we don't have any service.
Right.
We bring our phones, but we just kind of use Wi-Fi.
Right.
We don't have any cellular signal. And when we get access to internet, we'll typically just download a map or some of these suggestions, save the spots, and we'll make our way there.
Yeah.
So Kobby, I know that that's probably one of your favorite parts, right? Is not having a phone.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think not having cellular service allows me to really connect with the city and the people I'm with. I think it's kind of funny though, whenever you do need a phone, we realize dude, we need to figure out where we're going to go. So okay, let's try to find a place with Wi-Fi. So walk into a restaurant, not know the language, and we'll be like, Wi-Fi? They'll be like, Wi-Fi? And they're like, no, we don't have Wi-Fi. So we awkwardly look at them and just casually make our way out, try to find a place that does have Wi-Fi. But no, yeah, it allows you to just really become one with the town or the city or the people you're with, minimize the distractions. So I think it's a great way to travel. Obviously, you can take pictures with it. That's cool. But I think really immersing yourself in where you are at the time will help you get the most out of the experience. So
yeah, I kind of almost think of it as a fasting experience away from your phone, right? You guys know how I feel about fasting. I'm always trying to fascinate for everything I can find. So honestly, just getting time away from a phone, I think is something that we all aspire to do, but it's hard in our day-to-day lives. But traveling is a great excuse to be able to do that, right?
Right.
So one of the things that I think people would love to know is what our average day looks like, right? So we get into a city, we have a few suggestions, but let's just say we wake up, it's 8 a.m., right? What will our typical day look like?
All right, let's be realistic here. When we wake up, it's probably 10, maybe 11. But we might say we're going to wake up at 8. But I'd say, yeah, honestly, wake up around 10:30, like take an hour to get ready.
Half the day's gone.
Exactly. And then, I mean, usually the night before we would have decided kind of like a skeleton or an outline as to what we want to do for the next day. So we kind of have a general idea to just kind of wake up and just go from spot to spot, probably about 1:30, 2 p.m., grab like a bite to eat for lunch. Nothing too expensive because usually we dabble for dinner. So after lunch, walk around, see some new things, maybe rest, come back, just kind of chill. Yeah, like I said, dinner time was probably one of my favorite times just because that's when we all knew we were gonna eat well and just laugh and have fun. So I'd say that's like the gist. And then if we wanted to engage in any extracurricular activities after dinner, well, that's another conversation.
I love that. No, that's a pretty good outline of our day. Grant, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I would say just like it depends where you are. I think that those big cities, like for example, where in Spain, like when we were in Madrid, you have your museums and your castles that you want to see, and they might be in the same area. So you want to go out for the day, and you can go to a museum and go to this castle that's in the same area, and then catch sunset at this place. That has a good view or something like that, where that kind of plans out your day. Then there are other places, like we went to Toledo in Spain this last trip, and there wasn't a whole lot of sights to see, not like a whole lot of museums and castles, cathedrals, but there was a beautiful hike that you could take around the city walls. So we decided to do that, and we took a few hours out of the day to do that. So it really depends where you are and what kind of things you're looking to do. But yeah, I think that, the best way to do it is to kind of do it with people that you have the same interests with. So you're able to, pick out things you both like doing, and to kind of be spontaneous or, kind of do things as they come. So
yeah, I think some of our favorite memories come from the spontaneous activities, right? We'll walk around and then I'll always notice some like shops selling some of those random things, and we'll just walk in and we'll just, next thing you know, we're there for like 30 minutes learning about how leather is made, or where these scarves are from, and we'll just look at all these things and we'll just kind of be amazed at what we find.
Yeah, or we'll happen to stumble across a salon for students who want to learn how to cut hair, and we'll get haircuts.
That's right. For €5. That's right.
some sweet fades.
Honestly, that was the most fresh fade I've had. And it was easily the cheapest one I'll probably ever have, right?
He came out with a goatee, too. Yash was looking good for a few weeks.
That's a different conversation. So I think one of the things that I love telling people is that when we typically travel, we're traveling for really cheap, right? So we'll typically get an Airbnb that might cost us about, €50 maybe for all of us for a night. So that, we split it between 3 or 4 people, that ends up being about 10, 12 each. And then, and so when we have the rest of the day, we honestly, like Kobby said, we're honestly not spending that much, because a lot of these sites and these cathedrals and just the attractions are for the most part free. And by the time we start doing all our spontaneous things, slipping into stores and just checking out what's there, that's our entire day is gone. And then it's dinner time. That's probably the only time we're actually like spending real money. And, then we'll probably spend about 15, 20 euros. So yeah, like Kobby, so what's your like favorite part about just, as we're talking about our day and it just being so cheap, how do you think we're able to like maximize that?
I think we all realize like what we want to get out of our experiences. So there are certain things that like, maybe we might walk around in the city and like, maybe there's something you want to buy. So like, I might not be interested in buying this. I don't have to, but because like that's up your alley for sure, like go ahead and get it. So I think we all know like what we want to get, like we want to come back home with. For example, when we studied abroad in Maastricht, I'm not really one for souvenirs, but I knew for a fact I wanted to come home with, another one soccer jersey. So I didn't really spend money on souvenirs per se, but once I found that jersey, like that's what I bought. And so I kind of quote unquote saved money in that aspect just because I knew what I wanted. I just got it. I don't know. I think one big way that we saved money, especially when we studied abroad together, was in terms of meals. We'd go to grocery stores, because I remember every time we'd go to a new city, we'd be there for a few days. The first thing we'd do, go to the Airbnb, put our stuff down, then we'd go to a grocery store and buy groceries. So like eggs, bread, whatever. And then we'd like make sandwiches, like make small breakfasts to take with us throughout the day so that we could save money and save time, honestly, not having to sit down and go to a restaurant, but like just pack sandwiches on the go, like find a place like a park or something with a nice natural view, have lunch out there, talk with one another, and just continue our day. So that's when we save money, was just like going to grocery stores, buying little groceries and helping us like with food on the go, if you will. So
yeah, I totally agree. I think that the way that people spend the most money when they travel is by eating out or going out for drinks and things like that. And I understand, because it's one of the most fun things about traveling. It's, being able to eat new foods and foods of the culture, go to new restaurants, things like that. So I think that one of the ways that we were able to balance that is usually for breakfast, lunch, we would get things from the grocery store, make sandwiches, have eggs in the morning. And so we were only eating out for dinner. And that saved a ton of money. And we never went to really expensive restaurants. We were usually trying to find a deal anyway. But I think, the grocery stores are great there, and you can find things that are local and, fresh foods there. And you're able to save a lot of money doing that, especially when you're splitting with a bunch of people. So I think that was one of the ways that we saved probably the most money. And even, in Belgium and the Netherlands, they have some of the best beer in the world. And, one of the things that you can do is just go over to the local grocery store and you can pick out a variety of beers, and they're €1 each. Whereas if you're going out to a pub, they could be €4 or €5 a pop. So I think that...
And these are nice beers, right?
Yeah, and they're nice beers. Things that spend like €12 a pop here in the US, but, they're €1 when you're in Europe. So I think that, buying from the grocery store, trying to not eat out as much, and save up and save for the night and, pick out just one meal a day that you would want to eat out for. I think that, that saves a ton of money.
Yeah. A couple things that you mentioned there that really stood out to me. So one, yes, European grocery stores are so cheap. And I think we're always amazed. Even this last spring break when we went back, I just didn't, I kept asking you guys, did y'all know it was this cheap? Because I couldn't figure out why in America we're paying almost twice as much for the same foods. And the second thing you said, Grant, that really stood out to me was, for us, I think as you're kind of explaining it, people might think, well, these guys are probably not enjoying their time out there as they could, right? And in reality, it's just that we just pick the spots that, kind of like you said, Kobby, that we really enjoy, right? We enjoy spending time with each other. We enjoy going to a few things each day. And we enjoy just leaving the day open for a lot of the spontaneous stuff that we just find in the city. And next thing you know, our entire day is gone and we just had a great time. So Kobby, Grant, how much do you think that we typically spend when we go out? I think the number that I keep throwing out there is about €30. I mean, if we're spending 10, 15 euros on an Airbnb on a weekday, that leaves us about 15 to 20 euros to spend for the rest of the day. And sometimes I don't think we ever even feel that, right?
Yeah. I think it depends on where you are. Because I think the largest two expenses can be where you're staying. So the Airbnb that you pick, it's easier when you're in bigger groups to be able to split that up. And keep the costs low. But yeah, you can find, if not, you can pick a hostel if you're traveling by yourself, and you can usually find one for 10 to 15 euros. But staying somewhere in, Prague is going to cost a lot less than, say, France, especially Paris, so, picking the places where if you are on a strict budget, then you might want to pick somewhere in Eastern Europe, or pick a cheaper country to travel to, because the cost of living can vary a ton throughout Europe, and then also transportation. So if you're able to walk most of where you're going, that can also save a ton of money. But yeah, I think that you can keep it under about 30 euros, especially if you're only eating out for one meal. So maybe 15 euros for your the cost of where you're staying, 10 euros for dinner, and then maybe some €5 for the drinks. Go to a free museum, use your student ID, and yeah, you can definitely have a few days there where you're staying under 30 euros. which will definitely help you in the long run.
Yeah, and I feel like there's a common misconception that the reason why people think traveling is so expensive is because people only think of like these certain spots that just happen to be expensive, like your Parises, like Rome, stuff like that. But like, for example, when we went to Poland was dirt cheap and we had a blast.
I don't think dirt cheap is doing it justice. Like, it was cheaper than dirt cheap.
Because we went to that restaurant where literally each entree was $2.50. So we all got 2 entrees.
And it was fine dining restaurant, right?
Dabbling. Our boy Josh Crumb was having the time of his life. But so I think it's also important to realize that like just because like you haven't heard of a place doesn't like take away from the experience that you can have there, and it also might save you money too. So I think that's something that people should also keep in mind as well.
Yeah, I think Poland was probably one of my favorites of just that whole trip. I mean, we went to Auschwitz, and that was the most sobering time of my life. And then, then we get out, and then we find these restaurants, and we're like, hey, well, at least it makes up because we got to eat some really good food, right? Yeah. So, no, that was a great place to visit. So I thought maybe this is a good time in the segment to kind of mix things up and put you guys in the hot seat. So this is where I get to kind of ask some random questions to you guys, and I'll pull myself out of this. So I don't have to. I'll just put you all on the spot. Okay. So what we'll make it pertaining to traveling. So from our experiences, what do you think is one of the most memorable times that you've had, or places that you visited?
Honestly, I think going back to Maastricht the second time, just because the three of us just remember like the experiences that we had there the first time we were there. And so coming back with, I guess, a little more experience, if you will, a little older, we kind of knew what the city had to offer. And just kind of hanging out when we were staying at Taikyo, the dorm we stayed at when we were first there. We got to stay there when we went for spring break, and just kind of reminiscing, like listening to the same songs we listened to when we were there a few years earlier, eating at the same places. Just kind of doing everything a second time, but just because of the sentimental value just made for a great experience. So I think that was one of my most memorable, going back to Maastricht a second time.
Definitely. Yeah, no, I agree. Maastricht was, it was awesome going back the second time. And I think that that's a really cool thing to be able to do is kind of make memories somewhere and then be able to go back is really cool. But I would say, specifically from our first time abroad, I would say one of my favorite trips was to Prague. Was one of my favorite cities to go to. Prague, as Yashanka would say. I think Prague was awesome because it's a totally different culture in Eastern Europe. The people are very different. The architecture is very different, and it's unique to itself. And I really enjoyed that. It was also pretty inexpensive, so we were able to do a lot more with the budget we were on. I think that, Prague is not a place that, was on my bucket list going into the trip, but it turned out to be one of my favorite places, which I think that's one of the coolest parts, is be able to go somewhere that you weren't expecting to fall in love with, but then have it be one of your favorite places you've ever been. I think that, that's one of my favorite memories from traveling.
Yeah, I think that's because a lot of people, when they think of the best place to go in Europe, they think of the hot spots, right? Exactly. And then you kind of forget that the smaller cities, or like we went to Toledo this past time, and it's basically like this fairy tale almost, this small city outside of Madrid, and that was like honestly my favorite place of the entire time I was in Europe probably. And I think it's because, like I said, it's because these bigger cities are sometimes overrated. So what city or place in Europe or from your travels do you think has been overrated?
Overrated? Mm-hmm. I'm going to go with Paris. And that's not a knock on Paris. Like, Paris is pretty dope. But I think I'm just going to say that just because I was only there for like a day, so I didn't really get to experience as much as I wanted to. But I'm sure if I would have stayed for longer, maybe my answer would be different, but at least for me, I'd say Paris.
Yeah, that's a tough question. Yeah. I would say, I would say London was probably my most overrated. Part of it was because the weather wasn't very good when we were there. But I think that British culture is, I guess, probably the closest to American culture, so it wasn't as much of a different experience in that way. And I think some of the best parts about the UK is kind of the countryside. So I think that if I was going to go back to the UK, I'd probably go out more to the countryside than rather than stay in London. But there's no European city that's too overrated.
Yeah, no. Let me just disclaimer. I love Paris, but just
I mean, it's like being in the U.S. and like most people will go to Washington D.C. or New York, which obviously you won't get like a full glimpse of the U.S. if you just go to those two cities. But that's not a knock on either of those two cities. Yeah. I mean, they're both great.
Like Oklahoma City.
Yeah,
great
you won't get Oklahoma City.
Place, Oklahoma City.
Montana or something like that.
Unselfish shout outs. Love it. So with that being said, so what do you guys think is the most underrated place that y'all have been in Europe or in your travels? That's not Oklahoma City or Montana.
Yeah, that's tough. I mean, I think going back to, our roots, I think that the Netherlands kind of gets forgotten a little bit. I think that when people think about the Netherlands, all they think about is Amsterdam. But being able to be in Maastricht and the surrounding areas, you find out like what a beautiful country the Netherlands is, and what a great people Dutch people are and how friendly they are. And I think that might just be a product of actually being like in the country itself and living in that country. I think that maybe if we were in France and staying, not in Paris, but in a smaller town in Paris or in France, then we might feel the same way about France, that it might be underrated just because you're experiencing like a different side and not just like the big cities. So I think that, in Maastricht, we were able to have that experience of, seeing everything else that the Netherlands had to offer outside of Amsterdam. I mean, same thing with Belgium. Belgium.
You literally just took my answer.
No, yeah, you can talk about Belgium too. Because,
yeah, no, definitely. I definitely agree with the Netherlands, but I think Belgium as well. Obviously, you have Brussels, which is pretty cool. But we got the opportunity to travel to Aachen, which is like a smaller town.
Bruges too.
Oh yeah, Bruges. I think. Yeah, I definitely messed it up. Yeah, I went to Bruges. Aachen is in Germany. But no, Bruges is kind of like Venice. They're just like a lot of, what are those things called?
There's a lot of canals.
Sorry.
There's a lot of canals, and there's this really cool tower that we were able to climb. We were able to oversee the whole city.
Yeah.
It was raining like the entire time we were there, but we still had an awesome time. Like It's a beautiful kind of smaller, everything is walkable. It was an awesome city to be able to experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite parts about talking about Europe and kind of reflecting on Europe with you guys is that whenever we say, hey, where are we going to go back to if we go somewhere, it's always the smaller cities that we reference. And I know, Grant, you were talking about going a little bit more Eastern Europe and especially going to some of the smaller cities, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I would love to do that. I honestly don't know that much about like smaller cities in Eastern Europe that I would want to travel to, but I think that it's something that you could just go there and you could kind of find your way through it and kind of be spontaneous with it. So,
yeah. So we'll take you guys off the hot seat on that one after that one, but so one thing that I think as I reflect on my time and our time in Europe and traveling is that the first time we did it, it was fun. The second time we did it, it was so much easier and only that much more of a blast. And as we think about, traveling again somewhere, I feel like it's almost like, why not? Right. Mm-hmm. And I think it's because, we kind of went over this barrier of, traveling is something that we're scared of, right? It becomes something that we're very comfortable with. Would y'all agree on that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd say that.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that after Maastricht, my confidence went up a ton with traveling, and also kind of carried over to a lot of different things because I kind of realized that you can get out of almost any situation or find your way through something as long as you have your passport, your credit card, and your phone. And as long as you have those three things, then if you're in a city, like you'll be able to find your way through it and you'll be able to come out okay.
Yeah.
So like not worrying about. Yeah, it just it takes a lot of worry and a lot more confidence, once you just do it.
Yeah, I think one thing that I've realized in getting to travel is that the people who are at the places where you're going to, they're willing to help. And the reason why they're willing to help is because they love the country they live in and they want to show it off to you. So they have no reason to like kind of be rude or just not help you out because they want you to love their place as much as they do. So it makes it a lot easier whenever you're looking for recommendations for places to eat or like things to see that might not be the most popular. But because they like are so passionate about where they're from, they'll be happy to like take the time and help you out. So I think that's one thing to keep in mind as well.
Yeah. So if someone were to come to you and say, hey, I'm thinking about traveling to Europe, South America, someplace they found that's cheap and maybe following like kind of our framework of how to find a place, what advice would you give them of things not to do when they travel?
I would say that one of the things to think about is, think about, first of all, where you're staying. I wouldn't go out and book the nicest hotel you can find in the nicest area because looking at Airbnbs and different options can give you a lot more of a flavor of the local culture, and it can also save you a ton of money. So I think that that's one of the first things that you'd want to look at, but also to go in and make sure that you have done some planning and know that you're going to be able to get from one place to the next. So making sure that there's a train that goes from the city that you're at that is going to go to the next, and that it's going to be affordable, and that there's times for you to be able to do it. I think that there has to be some planning. I think that you'll find a balance between like over planning and like totally cookie cutter, like making your whole week planned out, and totally going in unprepared. Like you would want to find like a balance between those two, of doing some planning to make sure that you know what you're doing. But also like leave yourself some room to be able to kind of experience it as you go. Yeah,
I'd say not to like come in with like 80 preset expectations. Like just travel with an open mind. Just because you think you're gonna like a city, don't like make yourself like think you have to like it. Like if you go there and you find out you don't like it as much as you did, like that's totally fine. You could find another place that you love more than you thought you would. So I would say like don't go in just like having these expectations like, oh, okay, I'm going to go to Paris because I've always wanted to go and I think I'll love it. So I'm like going to force myself to like, I'm going to do everything I can. Like if you don't like it, like it's fine. Like you don't have to like Paris.
Kobby's really hating on Paris today.
But just kind of travel with an open mind. Just be free and just allowing yourself to experience everything there's to experience and just kind of go from there.
Sure. It's okay, Kobby. I'm with you. Paris was my least favorite city too. So I totally get it. And I think one thing that I kind of want to go back to now is that we mentioned Airbnb a lot, right? And after traveling for months in Airbnbs, we've kind of realized that there is a secret to Airbnbs. So Grant, what did we find about Airbnbs after traveling or using them for so long?
So for Airbnbs, you want to make sure, first of all, that you're booking a good one. So make sure they have good reviews. Make sure they have a super host, ideally. You don't want to find yourself in a situation with a bad host or one with little reviews because they can be really bad.
And typically we always pick a place that we get to ourselves, right? We never share it with someone. Right. It's typically, we're kind of going with, the most refined search we can get.
Yeah. You can use filters to kind of find out what you want. And then we also found that, there's kind of two times that you want to be able to book them, either, pretty far ahead of time, which like if you're trying to be spontaneous and kind of make your plans as you go, you might not want to do that. Book Airbnb a few months out ahead because, you might want to, stay a couple of nights extra somewhere. So what we found is that you're also able to find very cheap prices for Airbnbs if you wait just a day or two before you're going to book somewhere, because a lot of hosts will knock down their prices to try and fill their rooms just like a few days before the day is there. So we were able to find a few really good deals on a few Airbnbs by doing that. And places that we really didn't even know we were going to stay, or we wanted to stay somewhere a couple extra nights.
And the only reason we found that was because we kind of have this, like we end up building a relationship with our hosts, right? And they end up just spilling out all their secrets. And one guy actually told us, hey, like I boost up the prices about a month before, and then if I still don't have anybody staying with me, then I'll lower the prices like about a week out. And that Yeah. So, and just like that, I think the hosts are also, we mentioned this before, but they're just so willing to give any feedback or advice on the city. And that really helps us out a lot. So, that's always a great point of contact in every city. At least you have one, right?
Yeah, definitely.
For sure.
So now as we're kind of thinking about our lives, we're all off to med school, but traveling is something that's near and dear to us. So as we're thinking about traveling in the future, what kind of comes through your minds as you guys are planning your next trips?
I think the first thing that comes to my mind is why not now? And that's simply because I realized that this is the most time I'm ever going to have for the rest of my life. Like from here on out, like it's just going to get more and more busy. So I think it's important to realize that, like saying like, oh, I want to go here in like 5 or 6 years. Like,
or the worst one, which is after I retire, right?
That's right.
I hate that one. You don't even know if you're going to have your knees by then.
No, but yeah, realizing that like, why not now? Like you can make it work. Like if you really want to, you can find a way to make it work. Obviously it's going to be tough for us once we're in medical school. So we'll probably take like a 4-year hiatus, but afterwards. But yeah, just realizing that there's time to travel and you just have to like find the time and just like move things around, do what you got to do to do it. And it's very possible.
Yeah. I remember the first time we finished Maastricht when we were sophomores in college, we'd tell ourselves, and one thing I kept repeating that I found myself repeating was, we'll be back to Maastricht for at least 10 years, but man, it's going to be a great reunion when we get there. And, you know, 2 years later, we're back. Yeah. And that was a surreal feeling.
Yeah, sure.
But yeah, Grant, what about you? When you think about travel, what do you think about in the future?
No, I totally agree. I think that I agree with Kobby saying that this is the least busy you're going to have like a time in your life. I think that, you know, it just keeps getting busier from here and there's more excuses not to do it. Whether that's kids, marriage, whatever it is. So now's the time to do it. And I think that, you know, cost is one of those things that keeps people back. So knowing that you can do it for decently cheap, and I think that helps people a lot. You know, a lot of people think that you have to save up enough money to be able to retire so that you can travel, and so you work your whole life to be able to travel. I don't think that's true. I think that you can, you know, carve out some money in your budget to be able to do it now when you're young. And I think that you'll enjoy. Yeah, you have the energy. We walk everywhere. You know, you have a whole different experience when you're young. So I think now's the time to do it. You know, that's the fun part of travel that we like. We don't like sitting by the beach all day, and you know, it's fun, but you know, we also like being able to run around, do different hikes and things like that. You can only do that when you're young. So now's the time to do it.
For sure.
Yeah, it's been such a blast traveling with you guys for these past few years, and I know we talked about, you know, going back to Maastricht once more already, which is crazy. You know, we say, you know, after residency or something, but lo and behold, maybe 2 years from now, we're back again, right? Who knows? So. I hope so too. Grant, Kobby, do you guys have any final thoughts about traveling as we round out this episode?
No, I mean, just like find a place and just go for it. Don't really let anything hold you back. There are always resources out there, whether it be the internet, people you know who've been there before, the people who live there. So like you have all the tools at your fingertips, just a matter of doing it. So I just say, just kind of get over that like mental jump in your brain, or that hurdle in your brain, just jump over and just go ahead and go.
I agree. Why not? Just do it.
Yeah, it's so sad every time I hear someone say, oh, I went to spring break and I spent X. And then I tell them I went to Europe and I spent X, right? And it's a lot cheaper than how much they spent. Okay. Yeah. and so that's always my encouragement is, you know, plan early. Make sure it's wherever you're going, it's cheap and affordable, and save up the money. And once you're there, you know, kind of like us, we enjoy what we really want to enjoy, and we spend money for that, and then we kind of really just live freely for the rest. But
even that being said, if you do have money and you want to dabble, by all means, dabble. Yeah.
So we're just going into debt. We don't have the money. So.
Yeah, but it's been a blast doing this with you guys and just traveling over the past 3 years. But yeah, Grant, Kobby, thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Had a lot of fun.
Thanks, Yash.
If you like what you heard on the Yash and Company podcast, go ahead and subscribe to stay up to date on all things Yash and Company. If you check out our website at yashandco.com, we'll actually mail you a free sticker if you subscribe. But until next Wednesday, ladies and gentlemen, this is Yash signing out.